Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Hot Topic in Fresh News on this Wednesday, the 2nd of November, 2023. We have multiple major news stories to discuss, so let's dive right in. First off, Egypt has announced plans to evacuate approximately 7,000 foreign nationals and dual citizens from the Gaza Strip. This operation will involve evacuees from over 60 nations and will take place via the Rafah crossing. The timeline remains unknown, but the Rafah border crossing was recently opened for the first time since the onset of Hamas-instigated attacks on southern Israel in October. The Israeli Defense Forces (IDF) reports killing dozens of militants overnight in the Gaza Strip. The IDF says it targeted Hamas infrastructure, including munition warehouses and launch sites, during these long drawn-out encounters. The conflict between Israel and Hamas has unfortunately led to a high number of civilians being killed, with the count exceeding 8,000 since the Israeli retaliation began. This has led to criticism from the United Nations, among others. Moving on to international reactions, Russia has attributed the escalation in Middle East tensions to the United States. The country claims to be working towards ending the conflict, although certain analysts suspect that Russia may benefit from a prolonged war. On the other hand, U.S. President Joe Biden has called for a pause in the Israel-Hamas war, aiming to rescue hostages held by Hamas militants. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is set to make his second trip to the Middle East within a month, intending to meet with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and other officials in Israel. He is also scheduled to visit Jordan and participate in talks to secure the release of more than 200 hostages held by Hamas. Qatar and Egypt will be leading these negotiations. Lastly, hundreds of foreign citizens have already been evacuated from the Gaza Strip via the Rafah border crossing, with further evacuations expected in the coming weeks. Among the countries confirming successful evacuations are the US, UK, Japan, France, and Germany, with Australia and Bulgaria also reporting successful crossings. Stay tuned to Hot Topic in Fresh News for further developments on this unfolding situation. Good day, dear listeners. I'm your host, Emily, bringing you the day's developments on our daily news podcast, aired right here on the Hot Topic in Fresh News. With me today, as always, is my astute co-host, David, who's keen to dissect, analyze, and give us his insights on the day's top stories. How are you today, David?
Always ready to delve into the news, Emily Norma. Thanks for having me.
That's the spirit, David. To our loyal listeners, remember to hit subscribe, enable notifications, drop us your thoughts in the comments section, and share our podcast with your friends and family. Your support keeps us going and helps us bring you the most pressing stories from around the globe, hot off the press. And let me tell you, today's headlines are something else. We have everything from major international evacuations to diplomatic tensions and high-stake negotiations. Trust me when I say, you won't believe some of the intricate dynamics at play here.
Absolutely, Emily. These aren't just news stories, they impact lives, shape policies, and even determine the future of international relations. It's why we're here, shining a light on these events.
Precisely, David. So, dear listeners, buckle up. It's time to dive into today's news. Remember, we're bringing it to you hot off the press. All right, for those just tuning in, let's quickly recap today's top stories. We've been discussing a major evacuation operation underway in the Gaza Strip, where Egypt plans to evacuate approximately 7,000 foreign nationals and dual citizens. This comes amidst ongoing conflict between Israel and Hamas, causing a high number of civilian casualties. The international community, including the United States and Russia, are taking steps to mitigate the situation, with U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken set to make another trip to the Middle East. So, what's your take on these developments?
It's been a truly eventful day. The scale and complexity of these events are a reminder of how interconnected our world is.
No doubt about that. And the situation in Gaza is particularly worrying, wouldn't you agree?
Absolutely. The human cost of these conflicts is always a concern. It's high time for effective diplomatic intervention. Let's delve a little deeper. Emily, could you give us more insight into Egypt's decision to evacuate 7,000 foreign nationals from the Gaza Strip?
Yes, this is a major humanitarian move by Egypt. The conflict in Gaza has been escalating, with a mounting civilian toll. Egypt's decision is aimed at protecting the lives of foreign nationals.
Do we know when the evacuations will start?
The exact timeline hasn't been specified yet, but Egypt has stated that it's preparing to facilitate the reception and evacuation of these citizens through the Rafah crossing.
And what about the Israeli Defense Forces' claim of killing dozens of Hamas militants?
Yes, the Israeli Air Force stated that extended battles took place with militants in Gaza, during which they eliminated key infrastructure belonging to Hamas.
But they've also drawn criticism for the high civilian casualties, correct?
Indeed, the United Nations has criticized Israel for the number of civilian casualties in Gaza. The situation is dire, with over 8,000 reported deaths since Israel launched its retaliation attacks.
It's inhumane.
It's a complex situation.
Complex? People are dying, Emily.
I'm aware of that, but we need to understand the larger geopolitical dynamics at play.
You're defending these atrocities.
I'm not defending anything, I'm providing context. I think I need a moment, excuse me.
Sure, go ahead. Emily seems a little rattled, folks. I'm not sure what's happening there. But let's keep the focus on the story. The human toll of this conflict is staggering, and it's crucial we don't lose sight of that. Now, where were we?
I'm back. Let's move on to discussing Russia's stance on the Israel-Hamas war.
Emily, what's Russia's motivation in this conflict?
Russia has blamed the United States for the escalation of tensions across the Middle East. However, some analysts argue that Russia could potentially benefit from the Israel-Hamas conflict due to the potential internal turmoil and falling oil prices.
And how about President Biden's call for a pause?
Well, after being interrupted during a campaign speech by a protester calling for a ceasefire, President Biden suggested the need for a pause to get prisoners out of Gaza. The White House later clarified that by prisoners, Biden was referring to the hostages held by Hamas.
So, no call for a ceasefire yet from the White House?
Correct. The White House has called for humanitarian pauses to allow aid and evacuations, but it has not called for a ceasefire in the conflict.
Now, Secretary of State Antony Blinken is heading to the Middle East again.
Yes, he is set to meet with officials in Israel, including Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, and will also stop in Jordan. Blinken's focus will be on both defending Israel and aiding Palestinian civilians. He's also expected to pursue talks to secure the release of the more than 220 hostages held by Hamas.
Quite a volatile situation.
Indeed. And, speaking of volatile, have you heard the latest trending news about the tech industry?
So the evacuation of foreign nationals from Gaza is underway.
Yes, yesterday saw the evacuation of at least 320 foreign citizens, as well as dozens of seriously injured Palestinians. Countries like the United States, the United Kingdom, Japan, France, and Germany have confirmed that their citizens were part of this evacuation.
Has everyone who needs to leave been able to?
Not yet, many are still waiting. For example, Australia has indicated that around 65 of its citizens, residents, and close family members are still awaiting evacuation.
It must be an extraordinarily complex operation.
Indeed. Bulgaria described the evacuation as a process happening in a complex and extremely dynamic situation.
How many more are expected to leave Gaza?
The Rafah crossing will reopen on Thursday to allow further evacuations. Estimates suggest around 7,000 foreign passport holders will be leaving the territory over the next 2 weeks.
Let's hope for a safe passage for all those people.
Thanks for joining us today on Hot Topic and Fresh News. We dove deep into the pressing news of the day, and we're glad you were with us for the journey. Please remember to subscribe and activate notifications so you never miss an episode. Sharing our episodes with your friends, family, and social circles helps us grow and reach more listeners like you. If you've enjoyed our conversation, leave a comment. We'd love to hear from you.
Absolutely. Can't wait for you to join us again tomorrow. We'll be here, same time, same place, ready to dissect the day's top stories. and I promise, we've got some intriguing discussions on the horizon.
We are truly grateful for your time and attention. We look forward to the next episode and the many discussions that will surely follow.
Until then, stay in the loop, keep your eyes on the news, our channel's content will amuse.